All right, let's just dive right into this explainer and uncover the brutal psychological truth about how the most intelligent minds actually operate. We live in a world that completely glorifies snap judgments, hot takes, and immediate reactions. But as we pull back the curtain on the cognitive architecture of highly intelligent people, you're going to see that the way they process reality is fundamentally different from the norm. It isn't just about having some massive database of facts, it's about the very structure of how they filter information. So let me ask you something. When you picture a high IQ, what does it look like? Do you imagine a brain that works like some sort of super fast calculator, just spitting out the right answer in seconds? Most people do, for sure. We have this culturally ingrained idea that being highly intelligent means you're always the first person in the room to have the answer. We picture a genius as someone who never hesitates, never doubts, and processes complex dilemmas at lightning speed. But as it turns out, the psychological data tells a completely different and honestly far more fascinating story. Well, get ready for a bit of a paradigm shift because psychology reveals that at the highest levels of IQ, the mind actually slows down. Average minds often rush to reach a conclusion simply to avoid the deep discomfort of uncertainty. We hate not knowing, right? So we just grab onto the very first plausible answer. But the highly intelligent mind doesn't do that. Instead of rushing, it acts as a slow filter. It starts simulating different scenarios, questioning its own initial assumptions, and aggressively looking for flaws. True intelligence isn't about being fast or overly confident. It's about being incredibly hard to fool, especially by your own mind. To understand exactly how they pull this off, we're going to explore the 5 deliberate layers intelligent people use to process reality. We're looking at probabilities over certainty, the power of cognitive detachment, using tactical delay, treating emotions as data points, and finally, zooming out for systems thinking. Okay, kicking things off with layer number 1, probabilities over certainty. You know, the average human brain absolutely loves absolute certainty. We crave it. We want guaranteed outcomes. We want to know, without a shadow of a doubt, if a project is going to succeed or completely fail. And because of this, people tend to reduce incredibly complex, nuanced choices into really simple black and white terms. But highly intelligent people, they view reality entirely differently. Instead of demanding a 100% guarantee, they calculate likelihoods. They might look at a path and say, okay, this has a 70% chance of success and a 30% chance of failure. This might make them sound cautious, maybe even hesitant in a meeting compared to the loudest, most confident person in the room. But this probabilistic thinking is a massive advantage because it forces them to actively plan for that 30%. They are already planning for what could go wrong. And here is the so what factor. This probabilistic thinking might make someone sound cautious, but it is exactly what builds bulletproof, resilient strategies. By accepting maybe, you strip away the blinders of overconfidence. You aren't shocked when things don't go perfectly according to plan because, well, you already factored that failure rate into your initial strategy. You are completely prepared to pivot. Moving right along to our second strategy, the power of cognitive detachment. Now, most of us implicitly trust our own thoughts. Whatever initial impulse pops into our head, we just let it drive our behavior and our choices. It's a habit psychologists call reactive thinking. Highly intelligent individuals, however, possess this wild, fascinating trait called metacognitive IQ. This is arguably the rarest form of intelligence out there. It's the ability of the brain to literally turn inward and observe its own patterns. They can step back from a situation and observe their own thinking as if it belongs to a completely different person. They look at their own logic and ask, wait, am I biased here? Am I favoring this option just because it's the easier way out? The practical takeaway here is absolutely massive. Auditing your own thoughts in real time, that saves you from total ego-driven disasters. I mean, we all have egos and we all make mental errors. But if you have the capability to watch yourself think, you act as your own quality control. It's essentially like having a built-in spell checker, but for your terrible life choices. You catch the flawed logic before it turns into a permanent, potentially ruinous decision. All right, that brings us to layer number 3, using tactical delay. This one directly tackles that deeply ingrained human urge to immediately label an event as good or bad the very second it happens. Psychology shows that highly intelligent folks practice something called cognitive inhibition. It's literally the mental strength to slam the brakes on your emotional reactions. You stop the reaction long enough to actually sit down and analyze the objective facts of what just occurred. This specific type of cognitive patience gives your ideas the breathing room they desperately need to evolve, allowing you to examine a problem from multiple, often conflicting angles before you finally settle on a stance.
The core philosophy here is so simple, yet incredibly profound. They don't rush to be right, they wait to be precise. In our modern, fast-paced culture, we usually assume the person who speaks first is the smartest. Actually, scratch that. A decision made in the heat of a sudden reaction is rarely a good one. Real accuracy requires time.
So, the big takeaway for your own life is that pausing is absolutely not a weakness. When you see someone taking a long, silent pause before answering a tough, complex question, they aren't being shy and they definitely aren't confused. They are engaging in high-level mental editing. They're just ensuring that when they finally do make a choice, it hits much deeper and solves the actual problem.
Let's dive into our fourth concept, emotions as data points.
Okay, let's clear up a huge misconception right out of the gate. Intelligent people are not cold, emotionless robots. They still feel things, and they feel them deeply. But when we look at average reactions versus high IQ responses, there is a profound difference in how those feelings are actually processed. The average reaction is to confuse feelings with facts. If someone feels threatened, they automatically assume they are in actual danger, and they blindly obey that emotion. But the high IQ response? It separates the emotion from the information. They can feel intensely angry about a situation without actually acting angry. They treat their feelings as just another data point on the dashboard, rather than the ultimate authority commanding their actions. Because think about it, if your decisions are driven completely by your current mood, you just become a prisoner to the present moment. Choices made in extreme anger or even extreme excitement, yeah, they rarely look good a year later. This conscious separation of how I feel from what is true is your key to long-term success. It allows you to make choices that will age exceptionally well over time, no matter how you happen to feel on the day you made them.
Which leads us to our fifth and final layer, zooming out for systems thinking.
Most people sort of experience life as this fragmented series of isolated events, a bad day at work, a random mistake, a difficult conversation, or a temporary setback. But high IQ minds zoom all the way out to employ systems thinking. Instead of just reacting to that one isolated event, they immediately look to identify the long-term pattern it belongs to. And once they see the pattern, boom, they can determine the root cause. They are thinking in terms of years, not moods. They're constantly evaluating how a single, seemingly tiny choice fits into a much larger, interconnected context.
The so what factor here is just immense. When you only focus on isolated events, you end up spending your entire life just putting out fires. You're just solving symptoms. But when you zoom out to see the bigger picture, you finally start solving the actual root causes. This adaptive, strategic way of thinking represents the absolute highest level of human intelligence. And practically speaking, it prevents you from making the same stupid mistake twice. So as we pull all of these concepts together, the big undeniable takeaway is this. Ultimately, intelligence is not some static score on a test. It is a thinking pattern. It is having the courage and the humility to adopt these specific, flexible frameworks. It means admitting you don't know enough. It means having the flexibility to entirely change your mind when the evidence shifts. And it means actively subtracting all those reactive emotional habits that constantly hijack your focus. I'm going to leave you with this brutal reality-checking question to audit your own choices moving forward. Next time you're facing a major dilemma, ask yourself, are you rushing to a conclusion just to feel the safety of certainty? Or are you willing to slow down, detach, and delay so you can actually be right? Think about which of these 5 methods you desperately need to incorporate into your life today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.